This is the Podcast Digest. Oh, yes, it is. It is episode number 16 of the Podcast Digest. Welcome back. My name is Dan Lizette, and this is the 16th episode of the Podcast Digest, Hang Up in Podcast. So if you're brand new to the show, just give you a brief rundown. Each week, I cover an interesting topic relating to podcasts, and then I'll tell you about two awesome shows that I think you should be subscribing to. So if this is your first time joining us, thank you very much. Thank you for spending a few minutes out of your week checking out a new show, maybe something you haven't heard before. And if it is your first time, I strongly encourage you to go back, subscribe, start with the first episode. I'll be telling you about a ton of phenomenal shows that you have to at least try as you work your way through the back catalog. You'll find, I guarantee you, a whole bunch of stuff that you will love and appreciate and enjoy. That's my guarantee to you. Nothing but the best featured right here on the Podcast Digest. And that's what I plan on doing again this week. So thank you for joining me. And let's begin, shall we? First section every week is our listener pro tip section. I've decided this week, because right now here in the States, I'm recording this on Sunday, December 14th, 11 days to go to the Christmas holiday. So if you are listening before the holiday, I figured I might help you out with some last-minute gift ideas for your podcast listening friends. If you've got people who love to listen to podcasts, or maybe you do yourself and you're wondering what to ask for, I'm going to help you out here. And really, these are items that are good all year round. I just thought this would be a nice time of year to run down some things I recommend and some ideas you might have to round out your shopping list. So, obviously, the first thing that you would want to talk about is headphones, right? They're pretty important. Now, I actually don't have a ton of experience with the traditional wired style headphones. You know, there's the Bose and the Beats and the Sennheisers and so on and so forth. And the only reason I don't is that I'm a very much pro Bluetooth person. So I'm going to go ahead in the headphone category, recommend something I've talked about, I don't know, a dozen episodes or so ago, the LG Tone 750. Now, there's several models out there. There's the Pro, the Ultra, and I think the Infinium is the most recent one. They're all great. I have had the 700, 730, and 750. If you're a fan of Bluetooth headsets, I really strongly encourage you guys to check these out. I'm a real big fan of the around-the-neck setup that they have. The battery life is absolutely terrific. I've got plenty of compliments on the call quality as well, with the mic down, at the base of your neck. I really like them. I strongly encourage that if you're into the market for a Bluetooth headset, or feel like somebody on your gift-giving list may enjoy a Bluetooth headset, look at the LG Tones, especially the 750s. So what about a speaker? We listen to things, we listen to podcasts. What about a great speaker, maybe one you could take with you? That's the Bluetooth speaker category, and there really are a ton of those out there. If you search for a Bluetooth speaker on Amazon, just kind of sort by reviews. I mean, there are so many great ones out there. You know, a few years ago, it was kind of dominated by, Jambox and Bose, but nowadays there are so many smaller companies and even big brands that that offer a Bluetooth functionality in a speaker, and kind of go by the reviews. These things actually do not break the bank anymore. The prices really plummeted, and they're great if you want to sit outside with them, or you're going to a barbecue and want to have some music, maybe the beach, the park. Well, of course, you can use them in your living room or game room or bedroom. Any ways to kind of just get the sound without the need for the headphones. Bluetooth speakers are another great idea. Here's another gift idea. It's sort of a follow-up from my conversation 2 episodes ago with my brother Chris. We brought it on one of our topics that we discussed, and that was Audible. Audible.com. I believe that if you're into podcasts, I'm going to bet you're probably into audiobooks, which is why Audible is such a huge advertiser in a lot of the podcasts that you listen to. They're smart about it. They know their market, that if you enjoy spoken word entertainment, audiobooks are probably something you get into, and Audible is great. I've had an Audible subscription on and off for a number of years, not currently today, but I have thoroughly enjoyed the times I was an active subscriber. This is also a great gift idea because they can be delivered electronically via email, so it's perfect for the last minute gift giving if you get stuck on Christmas Eve and realize, there's somebody I didn't get something for, but I bet they'd enjoy an audiobook. You can give a gift subscription, have it emailed. I believe you can even schedule the email to come on Christmas morning. So check out audible.com as another gift option. So if you do a lot of listening like me, here's another good idea, a great stocking stuffer maybe, or somebody down on the list that you don't want to spend too much on. How about a portable charger? Oftentimes our phones are dying no matter who you are, what you do with your phone. If you're listening to podcasts or not, portable chargers always can come invaluable, especially if you've got a long day away from power. So I want to point one of these out specifically, one I've got towards the end of summer from, actually I think it was right around the July 4th holiday, from Amazon. It's called the Bright Tech Energetic 3. I know, a crazy name. But this is something that I think is worth checking out. It's a little on the pricier side, if you will, compared to some of the others out there. I think I got it for about $39. I think it's about $45 right now. The cool thing about this one is that it's decent size with the 8,600 milliamp built-in rechargeable battery, but the real selling point is it's got built-in lightning and micro USB cables. Literally, they're integrated into the casing of the charger, and they fold down flush with the case. So you can just bring this with you, and you don't have to have the separate cable. That's always one of the aggravating things I've found, is that when I had previous portable chargers, you'd have to not only have the portable charger with you, but then you would need the cable, and then you have to find a way to set it in your pocket if you're walking around. This thing is all built into one little piece, and I really liked it. And a few months I've had it, used it several times. Keeps a great charge and super convenient with the built-in cables. So one more, I'll throw you one more gift idea, maybe that you haven't thought of. And this isn't just for the podcast listener. I mean, really any of us with the smartphones now. I imagine most smartphone users are like me, are like most of my friends and family, and they now rely on their phone for GPS. So if you're listening to podcasts in the car or you're using it as GPS, you need a place for that phone in the car. I'd like to recommend a company called iAudi as for a vehicle mount inside your vehicle. Both my wife and I both have these. They had a deal several months back. I ordered two, one for her, one for me. We like them. They work well. They hold the phone tightly. They're very small with, you can have it tilted, either in portrait or landscape, and they really work great. So there's another idea for you, the iAudi vehicle mount. That can be found on Amazon as well, as I think just about everything I've talked about can be found on Amazon. If you're like me, you love Amazon. I believe I did all my holiday shopping this year all online, and 85% of it was through Amazon. So I get achievement unlocked, all holiday shopping done online here in 2014. So let's go on with the show. Let's move into our show recommendations. But first, let me tell you a little bit about how I came to my first show recommendation. So I've alluded to it before. I've said it a little bit. Here on the show, I've shared a lot of sort of my personal life. You guys have met my brother. You guys know that I'm a mobile DJ. I made one reference to this in, I believe, back on episode 4, but I really am a huge sports fan. When it comes to sort of my time and my entertainment, obviously the podcasts are on very often, but I also am a huge sports fan. Baseball, basketball, and football especially. I played sports for my whole childhood. After my playing days were done, so to speak, I became a Little League baseball umpire for a while. I coached baseball and also played volleyball a lot growing up, and I was a volleyball coach even at the high school level for a varsity team. And actually, sports altogether are the number one reason I even sort of turn on the TV anymore. And oftentimes I like sports because guess what? I can be listening to podcasts at the same time. So obviously I've searched out sports-related podcasts to kind of, because I have an interest there. But it seems to me that a lot of sports podcasts are lacking just a little bit. I think the genre is lacking a little bit. Now, it's not that there aren't a lot of them. There certainly are. But I found a majority of these shows sort of fall into two camps. They're either TV or radio shows with their recordings converted to a podcast, which I actually think is great. That's just like Mike and Mike from ESPN, which I recommended back on episode 4. But they sort of then go another wide range and a wide swing of the pendulum to the other end, which are kind of like two guys in a garage drinking, BSing about their favorite home team, which, I'm sure there are people who would love to hear that, but it's not necessarily up my alley or what I'd want to look for in a sports podcast. I want to find something that's, original, polished, different than what I could find on TV. That's the only drawback I think of a lot of the ESPN programs, is that they tend to be a convert, at least for ones for the TV shows, directly from what you could see on TV anyways. Well, I did find one that sort of fits all of these criteria, and the show is my first show recommendation this week. This is Slate's Hang Up and Listen. The hosts are Stephen Fatsis, at Stephen Fatsis on Twitter, Josh Levin, at Josh_Levin, and Mike Pesca, at PescaMI on Twitter. The show's website is slate.com/hangupandlisten. Hang Up. So this is a somewhat odd source to find a sports-related show from Slate.com. If you're not familiar with that website, it's sort of all things news, pop culture, sports, articles, journalistic research, commentary, so on and so forth. But I came across this one. It's a panel show, basically releases weekly with, sometimes a second episode in a week thrown in. The hosts I really, really like. These guys are all pro. I believe most of them also do some commentary for sports for NPR as well as for Slate. They really put together a nice, highly produced show that is obviously, top quality in terms of listening. It is definitely not the two guys in the garage. There's a couple of things I really wanted to highlight with this show. First of all, if you're a sports fan, you should really check this one out. But this is not your repeat of the scores that happened last night or last weekend. It's not even highlights. There aren't clips from games. They sort of make the assumption that you know the score, you know the results. Rather, what they do is they cover the stories and they discuss or debate larger, more impactful issues in the sports world. They definitely bring their opinions. Make no mistake. The hosts, they don't try to be necessarily completely objective. At least not when they get into sort of the discussion portion of the show. But each one of these hosts are definitely unique. I've said this about several different shows with two or more hosts. Is the unique perspectives from different angles really are appreciated, and they help me as a listener, I find, to kind of get a full picture of something. But where they go is one of the things that I think is most important about the Hang Up and Listen podcast is, yes, they cover some of the big stories. So they definitely touched on the Ray Rice stuff with the NFL and some of the other big news, playoffs and what have you. But they also go into some of the, more less covered corners of the sports universe, if you will. And I think this is awesome. They've had stories covering gymnasts. They took a trip to a cemetery where a lot of baseball greats were. They did recently an exit interview with the departing ESPN ombudsman. That was really interesting. They did a story on the rise of esports. And, I bet a lot of you listening right now may not even know what esports are. Video gaming, basically, as a sport with teams and leagues and prizes and championship trophies and so on and so forth. So I really like it that they go into these other areas that, you don't see on SportsCenter. You wouldn't hear on Mike and Mike. You wouldn't hear on your general sports TV show or even sports podcast. And that is what I think is one of the things that really set this apart. I should mention that when you do listen to the show, you will hear them reference the occasional, pro or membership level form of subscription that they have at slate.com to get additional access to more Hang Up and Listen segments. I've not really explored that yet, but it is actually something I may consider. I think it's a little on the pricier end right now. Maybe if they, bring that price down or something, I very well may consider it. I'm only about the last 6 or 8 episodes in, but I really do like this show, and I swear the more I listen to it, the more I kind of like these takes. Recently they also covered the, if you're a sports fan, you heard about University of Alabama at Birmingham eliminating their Division I college football program, and they had a really great conversation about sort of how this came to be, why it happened, what are the real reasons, what were the reasons that were told, and it was just a really interesting, enlightening conversation about the topic. So if you're a sports fan, Slate's Hang Up and Listen at slate.com/hangup is worth your subscription. And I'm happy to recommend my second sports-related podcast here on the Podcast Digest. Check them out. So let's go to our second show recommendation this week, and this is a brand new show. I tend to like to listen to a show for a while to be able to throw my name and recommendation behind it. However, this show is only 2 episodes in, and I can, without doubt or question, give you my full-hearted recommendation. The name of the show is The Podcast Method. It is a 5x5 show hosted by the owner and founder of 5x5, Dan Benjamin. He can be found on Twitter at Dan Benjamin. The site for the show, 5by5.tv/podcast method. So, What is this one? This is also my second show I'm featuring here on the Podcast Digest about podcasting. So I've talked a lot about the podcasts I've recommended, and like we just finished there with Hang Up and Listen, that sports is one of my passions. Well, nowadays podcasting is also one of my passions, and I really enjoy a lot of the shows that I've been able to find that talk about podcasting. And I was thrilled to hear several weeks back with that Dan at 5x5 is going to be putting out a show about his journey, his knowledge, his experience in the podcast world. Dan Benjamin, if you've not heard of him, first of all, just go to 5by5.tv. That's 5by5.tv. It is one of the biggest players in the podcasting space right now. Sort of the only one kind of up there at that same criteria in terms of show production and output is probably Leo Laporte at Twit. But Dan Benjamin is also huge in the area. It is his full-time gig, a full network. There's at any given time over 30 shows, running that are live with, daily, weekly, or monthly release schedules. He is, I believe, one of the preeminent minds in the podcasting space right now. So if you're considering getting into podcasting, where I was back in July and August of this summer, or if you're already in it, if you've just started a show kind of like me here on the Podcast Digest, or if you've been doing a show for a long time, I highly suggest you add some of these shows to your own subscription list that help you get better at your craft. And this new offering from Dan Benjamin at 5 to 5 is one of the best I've heard so far, and I have sampled many of the podcasts about podcast, if you will. Now, why do I think that this is one of the top ones? Well, first of all, there's a clear demand. People want to hear how Dan and 5x5 is able to produce what they do. But there's another reason I really like the show above some of the other podcasts about podcasts. From Brian at ProfitCast, who I featured before on the Podcast Digest, and I still listen to that show and really, really much enjoy it. But Brian and some other big names like Cliff Ravenscraft, Dave Jackson, Ray Ortega, these are some of the big podcast coaches and quote-unquote gurus in the market right now. I do listen to a lot of them, and their content is really, really good. But, and it's somewhat of a big but, I think, they also are parlaying these shows and their help into another pitch, a side hustle, if you will. They have a podcasting school or their Kindle books, their membership sites, and that's cool, and that's great that they're able to, earn their living. And I'm sure they've been able to produce a lot of great podcasts and podcast hosts that have utilized them for the help and the coaching that they are able to provide. They're certainly extraordinarily good at what they do. But what's interesting here in the podcast method with Dan Benjamin is there is no side hustle. As of now, Podcast Method has no ads. Dan does mention his Patreon, which I want to mention to you as well, patreon.com/5by5 to help support what Dan is doing, by and large, not just with the Podcast Method, but all the shows. And it is a straight up Q&A sort of mind dump, if you will, from Dan on all of his experience. He talks about making sure that you don't make the mistakes that he did, and some of them were expensive mistakes, and just kind of hearing somebody with his experience and background go and share all of what he's learned, I consider to be very invaluable to somebody who's still new into the podcasting game. And if you find yourself in that position, you're new to it, considering doing it, this is required listening as far as I'm concerned. And Dan sort of pitches it in a way that, he feels that anyone can do it. So he kind of gives you the full gamut. He talks about some least expensive, options, either it be hardware or software, but then talks about what he uses and why you may want to consider moving from this level of hardware and software to the next level. Like I said, the show's new, but so far in the 2 episodes that he's put out already, I've already gained a ton of insights and new information. And if I can get that out of 2 episodes, you can see why I'm understandably excited about future episodes of the Podcast Method. This is definitely jumped near the top of my must-listen to shows. So if you're considering getting into this, or you're already doing this and you just want to learn more, this is probably my new number 1 recommendation for podcasts about how to podcast. That is the podcast method, 5x5.tv/podcast method with the host, Dan Benjamin, at Dan Benjamin on Twitter. Check out those. So those are my 2 show recommendations this week, guys. What do you think? A little bit different. Went back and touched on a couple categories I hadn't talked about in a while. That is a sports-oriented show and a podcast-oriented show. Slate's Hang Up and Listen and the podcast method. That'll do it for this week, guys. Please, please, please rate and review the show on iTunes and Stitcher, won't you? It will only take you 2 minutes. I promise you, and it helps me and this show out so much, helps it keep going, helps others find the show. I really would appreciate if you told a friend or family. Seriously, I can promise you, you know a couple of people who aren't into podcasts yet. And maybe they don't even have any idea what it is. So here's what I want you to do. Tell them to start with my website, thepodcastdigest.info. Just tell them to go there. If they're completely confused about what podcasts are, tell them to go to there and tell them that they can listen to that show there as well as find a bunch more. And that's how they can get started. It would really be appreciated, guys. I should have another episode for you guys next week. That will be the 21st of December. I should be able to have an episode out then. But the following week, the 28th, I am likely taking that week off as I will be out of town for the holiday. Now, I may try to sneak one in before or after my trip. Hard to say. Or I may just simply skip that week for the first time ever. So, thank you again for taking a few minutes of your time, for listening to the Podcast Digest, for supporting. Let me know your thoughts. Find me on Twitter at PodDigest or shoot me an email, thepodcastdigest@gmail.com. So until next week, this is Dan Lizette. Thank you again for a bit of your time, and thank you for sharing the Podcast Digest.